Okay, we're ready to
And we're
begin.
live. We are live.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Committee on Legislation, Tuesday, November 17th, 2020. Councilmember Farrelletto,
Here.
Councilmember Golumback,
Here.
Councilmember Noakowski,
Present.
Councilmember Rivera,
Present.
Councilmember Scanlon, Council President Pridgen,
Here.
Councilmember Bowman,
Present.
Councilmember Wingo,
Present.
Councilmember Wyatt.
Here.
Quorum is present.
Before we start from the top, I just wanted to address one item. There's some legislation on lead paint that is going to be discussed today. We're going to be taking that out of order at the end of the meeting today based on the amount of speakers. I believe as of right now, there's 9 different speakers on that. Each speaker is given the opportunity to speak for up to 3 minutes, but because we have a lot of items on the agenda, we're going to be addressing that last with all the speakers. So we will now start from the top.
Item number 1, food store license 671 Fillmore.
Motion to table.
Seconded by Council Member Noakowski.
Item number 2, concerns regarding school speed zone law.
Items open.
This item is open. We had a special session this morning at 11 a.m. where we where the council voted on a separate ordinance addressing this. If Mr. Dorn, who sent the letter, would like to speak on this, certainly welcome to. If not, we will receive and file this item.
Mr. Chairman, we have not been joined by Mr. Dorn, and this particular item comes from the Ellicott office.
Okay,
Receive and file it, Mr. Chairman.
Motion to receive and file.
seconded by Council President Pridgen.
Item number 3, concerns regarding school zone speed limit.
Items open.
This item is open, and if this person who shared this communication is not here, we will also receive and file this.
Edens and Lipschitz are also not present today, sir. Number
Motion.
3 comes from Delaware and 4 from Niagara.
Motion to receive and file.
Seconded by Council Member Bowman.
Item number 4, support for lead-based paint abatement legislation.
Items open.
This is an item we're actually going to hold in abeyance for a moment, and we will address this at the end when we're talking about the lead-based legislation that we'll be discussing today.
Motion to hold in abeyance.
Seconded by Council Member Wyatt.
Item number 5, November school zone comments from public.
Items open.
Again, this item is open. We had discussed this earlier in the special session, so unless one of my colleagues or someone would like to speak on this, we will be receiving and filing this.
Motion to receive and file.
Seconded by Council Member Golumback.
Item number 6, special use permit 1264 Hurdle for tavern and outdoor dining.
Motion to approve.
Seconded by Council Member Noakowski.
Item number 7, special use permit 2505 Main for tavern and outdoor dining.
Motion to approve with conditions.
Motion is to approve with the conditions set forth by the council member from the Maston District with that the owner of the building has regular community meetings, seconded by Council Member Wingo.
Actually, Mr. Chair,
Council Member Wingo.
thank you. The condition would be to meet with the community before they began construction to ensure that the community is aware of all of the details regarding development and how those apartments and the development will be utilized, how the restaurant and the other common spaces and that structure will be utilized as well. We just want to make sure that the community is aware. We've received nothing but supportive commentary at this point. But before they begin construction, we just want to make sure that this approval is based on them meeting with the community. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, seconded by Council Member Wingo. Next item.
Item number 8, right to know law in City of Buffalo.
Motion to table.
Seconded by Council President Pridgen.
Item number 9, ordinance amendment, Chapter 242, housing standards.
So we are going to return to items 9, 10, and 11, as well as item 4 at the end of this, or closer to the end of this meeting. So we will hold those in abeyance. We'll hold items 9, 10, and 11 in abeyance, seconded by Councilmember Wyatt, and move on to number 12.
Item number 12, ordinance amendment, Chapter 264, rental dwelling unit registration.
Items open.
This item is open on the agenda. It says that Eric Mickles is here to speak. Eric, are you here? So
Yes.
since Eric is not
Yes,
here,
I'm-
this bill is sponsored by council. Oh, there you are, Eric. We see you.
Yeah,
Mr.
it's
Chairman,
said
he
unmute.
is on, and we've also been joined by Anna Salikov to speak on this item as well.
Excellent. Thank you. Eric, you have the floor.
All right. Well, thank you. Appreciate you giving me the opportunity to speak. I'm going to let Anna talk about a lot of the technical aspects of the legislation, but I think it's equally important for the council and the public to know why we are changing these laws to begin with. And in addition to, the differences in the legislation itself. So if there's going to be one takeaway, it's going to be that these changes are for Buffalo's children. That is the core of this entire legislation. It's based on lead paint remediation, which is, commonly known to cause a number of not just cognitive developmental issues in children later in life.
Eric, if I can just pause you for one moment. On the agenda, I don't know if it was marked incorrectly, but we were talking about the Airbnb, or right now the item we were talking about was sponsored by Councilmember Rivera and Councilmember Nowakowski about short-term rentals. So we may have marked that differently. So if you want to just hold your comments on what you're speaking of till we return to that item.
Yeah, of course.
Councilmember Farrelletto.
Yes.
So the package of ordinances relating to lead includes the short-term rental, and I can explain why. When the council passed short-term rental regulations a while back, those regulations were inserted into Chapter 264. When we made extensive revisions to 264 for the proactive rental inspection and lead ordinance, we took those out and put them in a new chapter, 380. But the substantive components are all the same. And so it really is that 380 is in effect part of the package of ordinance amendments related to lead, but not so relevant directly to the new stuff. It's essentially just what you did historically on Airbnb in its own chapter. So I hope that clarifies it.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much. Do we have a motion to approve? Motion to approve by Majority Leader Rivera, seconded by Councilmember Scanlon. Next item.
Item number 13, ordinance introduction, Chapter 380, short-term rental housing.
This item is open.
Mr. Chair,
Councilmember Nowakowski.
this item is also regarding lead, so you can move to the tabled items, and then we'll return back to these items. There are about 4 ordinance amendments related to lead.
Okay, excellent. So we will remove the tabled items next. We have
Take from the table items 16, 17, 36, 39, 57, and 61.
seconded by Councilmember Nowakowski.
Item 16, special use permit 2464 Main Street for assembly in N3C zone.
Motion open to public hearing.
Seconded by Councilmember Bowman. This item is in the Delaware District. First, we would like to ask the applicant if she's present to speak for up to 3 minutes. And then I know there's another speaker who would like to comment on it. So if the applicant, Leah, if you can give a brief, if you can give an update on this, and then we'll go to the next speaker. Thank you.
Yes, my name is Leah Mills. I'm located at 2464 Main Street. I have been owner of that building and that property since 2008. It is currently a salon. It is 4,440 square feet. And there are 2,000 square feet in the back that is suited for public use, such as in public assembly. Asking if possible that I can use it as public assembly and actually to bring the community together and to have small activities. Each room can hold about 45 people. And I've actually spoken to an inspector to go through my permit process. And I'm pretty much at the end of that. So I don't know what else to say, but that's my ask is that that you say yes.
Thank you. And I know we talked about this before when you were applying. And so this was going to be for private events for individuals to have like smaller gatherings if people wanted to rent the space out. So you're not converting this to a restaurant or tavern. You're renting it out to individuals who would want to have a special event there, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Thank you. I know we had Robert then who wanted to speak on this matter.
Good afternoon. I canvassed everybody on the street except for one person. 90% of the people on the street are opposed to this project. The parking is so tight on the street that having an event in the evening when everybody comes home from work on the end of the street, a one-way street with no place to park just to go to their homes so you can have an event, just seems sort of out of line. That's one side. 90% of the people, I called and talked to everybody about this. And the other thing,
yes, sir. Go ahead.
Let me follow up one thing, is I don't think this is really in the spirit of the transit overlay district on Main Street. I've been here for a long time. I think that use is not consistent with what we were looking for in the transit district. But you can't put these people so they have no place to park when they come home. You just can't do that.
May I speak?
If you can address the chair. First of all, are there any other speakers on this item?
Everybody's working today, so I tried to get more people involved, but
that's okay. I appreciate the comments. One item just to point out under this issue comes up a lot, but under the city's zoning code and the green code, there are no parking requirement minimums. So when a business is opening, if it's a brand new building, you don't have parking minimums, let alone if there's an existing building and they want to change businesses or change uses, there aren't parking requirement minimums. Now, I know we often hear from people that live in residential neighborhoods when there's projects that come up, and the one item one of the first items people do bring up is parking. But during the public hearing, I just wanted to point that item out. And then what we'll do is we'll send this item without recommendation. And then before we do that, I just have a quick question to Leah, and then we'll move on. Leah, did you have any plans or any plans for parking when guests come?
Yes, sir. I plan to introduce myself to the church that's next door. They have ample parking, and they can also park on the street and around the corner. Doesn't necessarily have to be on Greenfield.
Okay, that would be great if you could follow up with the church and like what you're talking about is Main Street, because I understand exactly, I know exactly how it is on Greenfield. There's a lot of multi-unit houses there. It's a one-way street. It is hard to find parking. And I know with the winter, I hope that there's some agreements made that the city does some things in the winter for the winter parking, because right now you're only supposed to be able to park on one side of the street during the day. And then during COVID, the city has been allowing both parking on both sides, but that was set to expire on November 15th. And that was extended to November 23rd. I'm hoping there are some permanent changes there, but I certainly understand, I understand the parking concerns. And if you could please have a conversations with the church, that would be very much appreciated.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Motion to close the public hearing.
Seconded by Councilmember Scanlon,
Motion to send without recommendation.
seconded by Councilmember Bowman.
Item 17, special use permit 1732 William Street for tavern and N3E zone.
Motion open the public hearing.
Seconded by Councilmember Bowman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a new restaurant tavern that I spoke with the owners, and we talked about expectations about being a great neighbor to the residents. I had 1 or 2 residents reach out. They're excited to have another opportunity to have a great place to eat in the neighborhood. And our owner applicant has been, wonderful to work with, very accepting of the conditions that we're going to set. So at this point, I'll open the floor.
Just calling to let you know we're going to inspect her.
I'll say that again. I'll open the floor to Jennifer or Felicia if they want to have some comments, and then if there's anyone else to speak on the item.
Okay, is the applicant here to speak on this item?
Yes, good afternoon. I'm Felicia Williams. I am the actual owner of Jukebox Bar and Grill located at 1738 William Street. And I just want to point out that this was already a previous tavern. And I just looking to reopen this tavern. I have done a couple updates to the building as well. It's over 2,000 square feet. It has a dining area, full kitchen, and a bar area. So I plan to serve breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And I already have a parking lot, which is right next door to the building. So I can fit about 20 cars as of right now. So I'm thinking that it would be a great place for the community to come and enjoy some good food and jukeboxing as well as the bar.
Excellent. Are there any other speakers on this item? Okay, if not, we will close the public hearing.
Motion to close public hearing.
Seconded by Councilmember Bowman.
Motion is to approve.
Approve with conditions.
Motion to approve with conditions.
Seconded by Councilmember Bowman.
Item 36, zoning map amendment 11 Black Rock Harbor.
Motion to receive and file.
Seconded by Councilmember Gullumbeck.
Item 39, Michigan Sycamore Historic District.
Items open.
This item is open. Is there anyone here to speak on this item? I believe this is in Council President Pridgen's district, and I believe Council President Pridgen had indicated that he supported this item, which is number 36 on the agenda last time, I believe, but there was something about the timing. I'm not sure. So I'll open.
What was the item? I'm sorry, sir.
If you can do the screen share and pull up item 36, please.
It's 30. You mean
Or, I'm
39?
sorry, 39.
Yeah, 39. I do support. I think the question was about one gas station that was in. Is that the one? But I reached out to the owner of the gas station. I left him a number to call me, and I have not received a call. So we're going to move forward with that item.
Motion to approve.
Seconded by Council President Pridgen.
Mr. Chair, we did leave that public hearing open, so we would just have to have a motion to close the public hearing.
Motion to close the public hearing.
Seconded by Council President Pridgen.
Motion is now to approve.
Seconded by Council President Pridgen.
Item 57, funding complete streets with school zone revenue.
Items open.
This item is open. I believe Council Member Nowakowski wanted to speak on this item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did submit this resolution on March 17th. And In 2008, the city of Buffalo, the Common Council had passed a ordinance called the Complete Streets Program, which is to fund extra infrastructure to Buffalo Public Schools to increase their safety because there are about 5 Buffalo Public Schools that have the most amount of traffic incidences. The first being Emerson School of Hospitality, and then the Academy School, and then Hutch Tech, and then International Preparatory School. This is all crash data that was taken and put together by GoBike and then submitted to the school board. So as we want to make our schools safer, we also have to increase in infrastructure and overlays and in things that will make these side streets and campuses safer for our students. And the way that, I think the best to fund that is revenue, a portion of revenue from the school zones are the speed cameras to be then, reinvested back into the schools. I do have in the last resolve is Assistant Corporation Counsel Karen Gordon on.
I am here.
Hi, Karen. I do, want to move this item forward, and in the light of us just passing a compromise earlier this morning, I would like to, submit an ordinance amendment that would be included in this. Is that something that we could work on together?
Of course.
And can we place a section within the compromise that was passed this morning that we can fund this law derived from the revenue from the speed zone cameras?
I think this is something we would need to discuss a little bit more as it relates to where we would have to place something like that. So, but we can do that offline whenever you're ready. Okay.
Thank you.
No problem.
I would like to move this item forward.
Anyone else anyone else on this item? Yes, Majority Leader Rivera.
Mr. Chair, I'd just like to join in with Councilmember Mitch Nowakowski. I believe that a percentage, I don't know what the percentage is because there are costs associated with the cameras and the share that the city receives after it pays its vendor. But I agree totally. For many, many years, I have asked for striping on certain streets near schools, new technologies near schools. As a matter of fact, there was a time where we were thinking about putting new technology around Duvall College. It was mentioned by the commissioner, but nothing ever came of it. And sometimes we're looking for striping right at the crosswalks in front of school, and we've had a hard time getting just the basic striping on these streets. And I think we need to set aside money. If, here we are receiving funds from these speed zone cameras. And I truly believe if we really care about public safety, then we should be able to use part of that money for striping, for crosswalks, for technology, infrastructure, even sidewalks and streets and overlay is all part of that. So I agree that part of that, the funds we receive from the camera money, that we should earmark back to those school districts and surrounding neighborhoods around the school as well. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion.
Motion to approve, is it?
Seconded by Councilmember Nowakowski, or seconded by Councilmember Wyatt, who has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I too would like to be added. I thought I was added to this. I think that's smart. And if we're talking about, again, the safety of our children, we should make sure that we do it at every single school. And these proceeds can assist in that. I think that from what we've heard from people during this debate, that they wanted to see their side streets with speed humps and those type of things to, again, not only make the children safe, but those neighbors in that community safe. So I think this will be appropriate. I know we have to sit down and talk about that. And I didn't vote for the budget, so I just want to be clear, but I do vote for this portion of this belonging to infrastructure in and around schools where we have the school zone cameras. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next item.
Item 61, 1416 Main Street, local landmark.
This item is open.
This item is open. It looks in the Ellicott District, 1416 Main Street. Did we need to schedule a public hearing or?
Mr. Chair, this is only open to schedule a public hearing and then remain on the table until that time.
Okay, so do we have a date to schedule for the public hearing?
December 15th, sir, but I defer to the council president to make that announcement as it is in the Ellicott District. This remains from springtime. It got cut off because of COVID.
Okay, so the motion is to set the public hearing for December 15th, seconded by Council Member Scanlon. Motion to table, seconded by Council Member Scanlon. Next item.
Item number 4, support for lead-based paint abatement legislation.
Okay, so now we're returning to all of the lead paint-based legislation. So at first, I was going to ask the council members who sponsored the legislation if they wanted to speak, and then we will be opening it all up to the speakers who are here. And I appreciate everyone's patience in getting through the other items before we address this. So first, I know this was sponsored by Councilmember Rivera and Nowakowski. Did you guys want to speak now, or did you want to open it up to speakers and hold your comments till the end? Whatever you prefer.
And Mr.
Chairman,
Chair, just so you're aware, you have been joined by several commissioners on this item as well.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to commend our corporation counsel, Anna Falikoff, Eric Mickles, who works in my office, Councilmember Mitch Nowakowski, and many of the residents and many of the speakers that are here that are trying to plug in some holes, especially when it has to do with lead and lead in homes. So they've looked at the legislation, and I think they've made improvements to the legislation, and they'll get into the technical part of it and what parts they improved upon. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to them.
And just a quick, before we go into speakers, I'll hold a majority of my comments for after, but I do want to commend everyone that is on this call right now, from the Lead Safety Task Force to Anna Falikoff to Lou Petrucci to everybody that has worked very hard on combating lead, because lead poisoning is a City of Buffalo issue, but it's really a Fillmore District issue and a Niagara District issue, with the two highest zip codes being in the Fillmore District in Broadway, Fillmore, and one on the west side, I believe 14213. But a lot of these folks on the call have been working on lead for years. I've been working on it for a year, and the genesis of it was before I was a council member. I was a candidate, and I knocked on a constituent's door who's a Buffalo public school teacher, and who's a constituent of mine, and she made me on a cold day in March and a lead advocate in March, and now here we sit with a lot of series of ordinances to combat this issue, to keep kids safe, and she is one of our fellow speakers. But you can now commence to the rest of the speakers. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. I know, so the way it is on the agenda, we had an item filed by John Lipsitz, so we will start with John, and then the next speaker, we were emailing with Kara Mataliano, and she will follow Mr. Lipsitz.
Good morning, or rather good afternoon. I submitted a letter in support of the legislation in my capacity as a private attorney who's been representing lead-poisoned children for more than 20 years. It became quickly very obvious after representing children in Buffalo, Rochester, Auburn, and throughout Western New York that singles and doubles were the predominant locations where young children were lead poisoned, as opposed to multiple dwellings. And the importance of this legislation cannot be overemphasized. The problems of lead as a neurotoxin affecting children have been known in the published literature since the early 1900s as a result of work done at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore. In 1990, the Buffalo News published an article entitled "We're Poisoning Our Children," wherein it was stated that there is a racial dimension in the nation's lead problem, since the lead exposure is highest among poor inner city children, many of whom are Black. The Environmental Defense Fund estimated that 95.9% of the poorest inner city Black children under 2 years of age have excessive blood lead levels. All of us remember Flint, Michigan. That was only 4 years ago. But I would say that it was pretty clear to us at the time when we looked at the crisis in Buffalo and in Western New York that what's happening here although it's a slowly rolling chronic crisis, is in many ways worse than what happened in lead in Flint. And there was an article in the Buffalo News in February of 2016, which commented that the lead problem in Flint has attracted enormous publicity, but the problems in Erie County and throughout the upstate New York area are chronic and longstanding. They are tied to the age of the region's housing stock. Some 43% of the homes in Erie County were built before 1950. Now, we're talking about even more than that in terms of the housing stock, because any building, any structure built before 1978 is presumptively affected with lead paint. Now that we're in a situation where people are having to stay at home more and more because of the COVID-19 crisis, children will be spending more time indoors. When the warm weather finally does arrive again, they'll be out on their porches. I can tell you from having litigated these cases for children for many years that porches in places like Buffalo, Auburn, Niagara Falls, Rochester are subjected to the weather conditions. The paint is largely lead-based, at least on the underlayers. Because of the weather, these surfaces peel, crack, and chip off, and porches in the city of Buffalo are a very important place for lead exposure for young children. Lead is an independent neurotoxin. It affects children of all classes and all races in all parts of the city. Obviously, the chronic problems are worse in the inner city neighborhoods with old housing stock. And I would therefore urge all of you to support this legislation. It's a long time in coming, and we need it desperately in the city of Buffalo. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the comments. Next, Kara Matliano has the floor.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Kara Mateliano. I'm Senior Director at the Community Foundation for Greater Buffalo. And again, thank you for the opportunity to speak today, and thank you to the mayor for playing a leadership role in fighting lead poisoning. I facilitate the work of the Buffalo and Erie County Lead Safe Task Force, and we want you to know that this legislation is the single most important thing you can do to prevent childhood lead poisoning. The Lead Safe Task Force is co-chaired by Lou Petrucci, who is here today, and Melanie Desiderio from the Erie County Department of Health. Task Force member Pastor Pointer is here with us as well. And other members include doctors, parents, lawyers, faith leaders, community health workers, housing advocates, and the Buffalo Public Schools. Any one of them would welcome the opportunity to speak with you about the importance of proactive rental inspections. Rental properties are at the root of lead poisoning in the city. 80% of lead poisoning occurs in rental singles and doubles. Lead poisoning is caused by chipping and peeling lead paint and paint dust, and it's serious. It causes permanent damage to the developing brains of children under the age of 6. It can cause learning disabilities, impulsive behavior, loss of IQ points, hearing loss, and a lot more. And these are all permanent. They're permanent obstacles for a lifetime for approximately 900 to 1,000 children who are diagnosed with lead poisoning every year in Erie County, mostly children of color in low-income neighborhoods in the city. Fully 80% of African Americans in Buffalo live in a high-risk zip code for lead. The good news is that we can prevent lead poisoning by protecting kids from lead-based paint built in homes built before 1978. And you can put an end to this tragedy by approving proactive inspections of rental singles and doubles. These inspections will ensure that lead hazards are identified and remediated before children can be exposed to them and then poisoned. Now, Buffalo is not the only city in the country with significant lead poisoning challenges. Other cities with serious lead poisoning have reduced it by instituting rental inspections like those you have before you. In fact, no city has significantly lowered lead poisoning rates without rental inspections. For example, Rochester passed an ordinance in 2005 and reduced lead poisoning by 85%. Baltimore did the same in 1992 and lowered poisoning by 97%. The legislation you have now was developed by city personnel, Anna and Lou, at the direction of the mayor. And years of research and hard work have been invested in drafting this legislation to meet Buffalo's specific needs. We've done our homework, and here's what we know. that lead is permanently damaging Buffalo's children and stealing their futures. We know where the problem is. It's in rental singles and doubles. We know from other cities' experience that proactive inspections work. They address lead hazards and they lower poisoning dramatically. And we know that proactive rental inspections are the only tool with the power to radically reduce lead poisoning across an entire city. We also happen to be the largest upstate city that has not adopted proactive rental inspections. Syracuse and Rochester have already done so. So it's time for Buffalo to protect our kids as well. Any member of the Lead Safe Task Force would be pleased to speak with you about any questions you might have. We can introduce you to parents and landlords and really anyone you'd like to talk with about that. And as I mentioned, I have one task force member here, and that's Pastor Pointer. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the comments. I know there are several other people that would like to speak on this item. I think I could see most people on this, but there's some with the way my screen is that I can't see it. So if you all want to respect each other and start, someone can speak next and then approximately 3 minutes and then just chime in and go, because I want to make sure everyone that wants to speak on it does, and I just can't see everyone. So if someone would like to go next.
Can I just start then?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Vinny Rondinelli. I live in the city of Buffalo. I'm a real estate agent and property manager in the city. I've been doing so for about 15 years now. And I asked for the legislation. You know, I got a pretty thick book of rules. So I don't really know, I guess, exactly 100% what the legislation is. From the conversation that we were having, I feel like it's proactive. So the city inspectors are going to go through and inspect homes to see if there's lead paint, which is good, which is fine. I just hope that there's already a lot of organizations working on educating and enforcing education of lead paint, EPA, professional organizations like the Association of Realtors. And I just hope that whatever the city does pass today isn't going to be just another hurdle for landlords to navigate, as opposed to actually providing good housing for people. One thing I've bumped into throughout my course of inspections is the presumption clause. So if your house is built before 1978, it is presumed to be completely covered in lead paint, and any chipping paint from there is going to be perceived to be lead paint, and it'll have to be remediated. Most of the chipping paint that I deal with are from new steps and new porches that have been put on these houses, but it's still presumed as lead paint. So I just hope that maybe the city, if they were going to inspect these houses, they'd be able to differentiate between what actually is lead paint and has to be remediated and what is not and does not. Other things that I do a lot of Section 8 inspections. You know, they're like, you have to do this, 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 this. If you want to prove that this isn't lead paint, you have to have an EPA certified lead inspector come. For $500, they inspect the whole property, and give or take. You can probably get spot inspections for around $200, maybe, if you can schedule a guy for that much. Other things that people can do to prove that it's not lead paint are cannot be given to at least Section 8 providers. For $10, you can get a 3M lead paint swab. When the EPA teaches you how to administer these things, I'm a EPA certified lead renovator. They teach you how to do that in that class. An industrial kit, if you wanted to get really detailed, an industrial kit could cost you $63. I just hope that the city could, take these price differentials and include them if they are going to make people address lead paint hazards. And that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Councilman, Mr. Chair, Honorable Councilman. I'm Pastor Kaiser Pointer, pastor of Liberty Baptist Church, member of the Lead Safe Task Force. Let me be absolutely clear about what this legislation will do. It will do the most important thing that we are called to do as adults: protect children. There is no level of elevated blood lead level that children can survive that will leave them healthy and intact. It just doesn't exist. we know that any exposure to lead, and not just paint chipping, but we know that lead dust and the other lead hazards also are the leading cause of elevated blood lead levels in children. This legislation is Buffalo joining the ranks of other northeastern industrial cities, cities who, like Buffalo, have old housing stock. In Buffalo, particularly on the lower west side and on the east side, the average housing stock is 90 years of age. So look, you can do the math. It's real simple. Way before 1978, when we finally got a admission from the EPA that lead was a hazard in children, and that it was particularly based in lead-based paints. Long before that, we've known for over 120 years what the damage is that's done to children around lead. Why is it important? Because this damage doesn't happen to adults, but it does happen to children. It happens to children from the day they're born until they reach into their adolescence. This is an opportunity for us to bring our city and its protection of children into the 21st century. I've got to commend Mr. Nowakowski, who is the newest member of this council, and who, in walking the streets, took the time to listen to a constituent and then came to the Lead Safe Task Force and tried to discover what most of us have known for decades. So while we're not trying to cause undue harm to homeowners, to landlords, we are trying to protect children. And I think that protecting children trumps every other thing that we might determine that we would do or not do here. So let me just encourage the council, pass this legislation. Let the rest of us continue the work of making sure that not only do we use this legislation intelligently, but that we continue to do the hard work of education, that we continue to walk hand in hand with landlords, as we have created a number of methodologies to assist landlords. And our latest product, you may not know because you're not on the task force, is we have created a revolving loan fund designed to help landlords. Part of it is a grant. The other part is a low interest loan to remediate their property. We know this is not a walk in the park kind of situation, but we need every tool at our disposal to protect the children of this city. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and honorable members of this council for listening, and please, let's pass this series of legislation.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Spiro Carmen. I'm the troublemaker, I admit it. I was the constituent that Council Member Nowakowski referred to at the time when he was the candidate. And he made the mistake of asking, what is important to you? And as an old lady with decades of teaching under my belt, this is the thing I asked for. Please look into legislation that makes it a certainty that our children and our children's families, because in education, we're not just concerned with the children, but their families as well. It turns out that that heartfelt appeal on my part, which also, you know, I've given it some thought and rumination, and I considered that this is not a new issue. It's simply not. We know, as has been said earlier, that this has been we've known of the effect of lead on human beings for over 100 years. And we also know that it's been spoken of as an issue of poverty and housing for decades also. I look at Dr. Martin Luther King's words at his Nobel Prize address, where he refers to the undernourished and the ill-housed. And he also referred to, at another point, that of all the forms of inequality, and injustice in health is the most shocking and the most inhumane. I think of those words, and I think of this fact that he also said there's nothing new about poverty. What is new, however, is that we have the resources to get rid of it. And housing is exactly that. It's a simple, it's not the pleasure garden, it is a simple necessity of life that we be properly housed and that our children be given a fair chance in this life. And I can tell you there is nothing more heartening in the world than to see a child have that light go on in their eyes when they understand something you're teaching. But the other heartbreaking part is to know that in 2 days, that same child will not recall what was taught and what they got at that time. That being said, I refer to the CDC guidelines that indicate that lead poisoning is 100% preventable. And I echo Reverend Pointer's words that the CDC says there is no safe blood level in children. No safe blood level. So we think of Flint has now declared that their water is acceptable. No safe blood lead levels, 0. I also want to point out that all of the determinations by the CDC of damage to the brain and nervous system in children, slowed growth and development, learning and behavior problems, we see this all the time in the classroom. But I want to also stress that Mayo Clinic has indicated that adults also suffer with high blood pressure, memory and concentration effect, mood disorders, kidney damage, and nervous system damage. It is not just children, it is our society we look to protect. Some of this is irreversible damage, but we also know there are very expensive and very long in duration chelation therapies that can remove those metals from the bloodstream. And we're talking about a nation that, you know, we're arguing that everyone deserves health benefits. So Ms. Matliano made reference to the fact that this legislation can be proactive, and I implore everyone that when we do refer to this legislation, we do not wait to find those instances where there is a presence of lead in a structure. We don't wait for a reading in a child of elevated lead levels, but that we do act proactively. And I know that after Flint, the county walked around, they hit my house, they had a little meter where they were checking everywhere around my house outside looking for lead readings. And this is what I would think of as a proactive activity in a city that has so many structures that were built before 1978.
Thank you very much for your comments. We certainly appreciate them. Were there additional speakers on this item? I don't see any additional speakers. I know council, first of all, great. Everyone's done a really tremendous job on all this research and the time spent on this. I just got a message that Sarah Wooten would like to speak on this. So Sarah, and then I know Councilmember Nowakowski wanted to have some closing items on this. So Sarah, you have the floor.
Chairman, I'm sorry. Can I move back in there before Councilman Nowakowski and after Sarah, please? Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Councilman. Yep, so my name is Sarah Wooten. I am a community researcher for Public Good. And first, I wanted to thank Mayor Brown and to appreciate the work that his office has put into these amendments. I also wanted to thank the sponsors of this bill, Majority Leader Rivera, Council President Pridgen, Councilmember Nowakowski, and Councilmember Wyatt. Passing this legislation would be a landmark for the city of Buffalo, and of course, it would not be possible without all of you, so thank you. And on behalf of myself and the Partnership for the Public Good, we fully endorse the passage of the proactive rental inspection amendments. We're thrilled that these inspections will address lead issues, and they will address many other harmful housing conditions as well. So before I worked at the Partnership for the Public Good, I worked at a nonprofit legal service agency here in Buffalo. And part of my job was to take calls from tenants who were facing poor housing conditions. And the housing issues really ran the gamut. So we had a lot of ceilings that had collapsed due to water damage, severe mold, front doors that didn't lock, heat in only one room of the house when it was below zero and the tenant had a new baby. One woman lived in a 2-story single-family rental with her 3 children, yet they only spent time on the 2nd floor of the home. Why? Because a severe rat infestation had taken over the 1st floor of their home. And the tenant broke down in tears in my office while explaining it to me. And as council members, I'm sure you've heard many of these similar stories from your constituents. Sadly, these stories are pretty common in Buffalo. And as a tenant advocate, the best advice I could give to these tenants at the time was to move. There was little recourse for them. Any attempt to force their landlord to fix an issue would take months or even a year. But their homes were negatively impacting their health, and they couldn't afford to risk their health for 6 months or a year. So many of them chose to move. And what would happen to the property after that? Well, the landlord was free to re-rent the problem property to a new tenant, usually a tenant who couldn't afford much for rent and didn't have many other options. And so the cycle would begin again. The proactive rental inspection amendments press pause on this cycle of disinvestment and health harming conditions. Many tenants are afraid to call the inspector, even if they want to. In our 2020 report on evictions, half of tenants we spoke to had repair problems but did not feel comfortable calling the housing inspector. Many of them were afraid of retaliation from their landlord. And given the power dynamics of the landlord-tenant relationship, requiring landlords to schedule inspections is the right choice. We will, of course, not be the first city in New York State to do it, as many others have mentioned. While I fully support these amendments, one thing I ask the council to consider is to expand the amendments to include owner-occupied doubles. Many of these properties exist in Buffalo, and tenants in these homes deserve to be protected too. Tenants in one unit can experience conditions that are not experienced in the owner-occupied unit. Also, similar conditions can impact households differently. If an owner-occupier rents their 2nd unit out to a mother and her 2-year-old daughter, yet both units have chipping lead paint, who will be most impacted? Surely, we should not allow a 2-year-old to have the experience of lead poisoning simply because the owner lives upstairs. If property owners are renting units in their homes, they have a responsibility to provide safe, not hazardous housing. And trusting that they're doing it, unfortunately, is not enough. We need these regular inspections of these units to ensure that they are safe for tenants. In summary, I urge you to pass these critical proactive rental inspection amendments and to include owner-occupied doubles as well. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you, Sarah. Eric, you are up next.
Thank you, Chairman. So as I was saying earlier, I think it's important for the public to understand why we're taking this action now and kind of like what motivated us to get here to this point. So I just, in the interest of transparency, I want to go into a little bit more detail about why lead is such a problem and what personally got our office to really spearhead this initiative. So lead in and of itself affects the entire body. It suppresses the immune system, it stunts growth, but three things really stand above the rest. It replaces calcium receptors in the brain, which is critical to neurocognitive development, especially in young children. And if you imagine calcium as the oil that makes those synapses go, lead is tar. It blocks them, it causes them to misfire, and it is the direct source of many of the cognitive deficits and ADHD symptoms that occur later in life. The second is widespread cell death. We don't get too many acute lead poisoning cases anymore, where the blood lead level is over 60 micrograms per deciliter, which is how the CDC measures blood lead quantum. But it's still, at any level, kills brain cells and contributes to IQ deficits and further cognitive deficiencies. And the last is interference with the pruning process. When kids are around 2 years of age, their brains are rapidly creating neural networks in response to their environment. What lead will do is it will impede the process of snipping the unnecessary synapses. And what it leaves is quite literally a jumbled mess, and also contributes to a range of cognitive issues, especially when it comes to aggression and frontal lobe development. So the second aspect that I want to get to in the interest of transparency is who lead affects. So when lead was in gasoline, okay, which was discontinued in 1973, the average blood lead level in the general population was in between 12 and 15 micrograms per deciliter. Today, it's closer to 1.8, which seems like a substantial improvement, and it is. It certainly is. But the improvement is drastically unequal in its distribution. And so,
Eric, if you can submit the remainder of your comments to the council, just because we try to keep everything at 3 minutes. We have another meeting that starts at 2, and I know there's still 3 other people that wanted to speak. So if you can email them to me or the council chief of staff, we will absolutely make sure they're part of the public record and distributed to everyone. So thank you very much. I know Anna Falikov was next, Council President Pridgen, Councilmember Bowman, Councilmember Nowakowski, and Councilmember Wyatt. That is the order for right now. So Anna.
Thank you, Council Member. I'll be brief. I wanted to just raise a few points in response to the excellent commentary today. One is, emphasizing that this legislation, the core of it is proactive rental inspection of singles and doubles. The inspection under the legislation is every 3 years. The inspection focuses on health and safety, and the inspections are at this point to be done to non-owner occupied singles and doubles, units and singles and doubles. Ms. Wooten raised a point as to the owner occupied unit. So the owner lives in the bottom and rents the top. At this point, the legislation does not include that top unit. And that's because we've followed the general framework of the city's rental registry that the council passed in 2006. However, I'd like to, in my discussions with council members and the mayor's office, I think we'd like to continue the conversation about eventually bringing those units in to the rental inspection program, perhaps prioritizing first those units that are non-owner occupied, and then transitioning into bringing in those owner occupied rental units eventually. So I wanted to directly address Ms. Wooten's point. And to Mr. Rondinelli's questions and concerns about landlords, I just want to state that this legislative process has been very mindful of landlord concerns, of the fact that the majority of landlords in the city of Buffalo are small, don't have a lot of capital. And so as we continue to pursue the implementation of the legislation, assuming that the council does proceed with its passage, we'll be doing so in partnership with landlords. They are our partners in making sure that this happens and this is done well. So with that, I'll leave my comments aside, but I'm happy to speak to any council member after this meeting about any of the details in the legislation.
Thank you very much. And I believe Holly Hutchinson was here to speak on this as well. So Holly, if you would like to speak.
Yes, thank you so much. My name is Holly Hutchinson. I live in the Delaware District and moved back to Buffalo 10 years ago. And I've been a renter during this whole time, the 10 years. And I'm here to support the amendments for proactive inspections. And I wanted to give you some examples from just one rental to explain why. And the example I'm giving, it was in a very nice neighborhood in a double. And when I moved in, I realized quickly that I would need to triage the problems there. So the triage list that I came up with was to start with the electrical, then go to the plumbing, and then to the air quality. The electrical was one of the light fixtures was flashing and blinking and buzzing, and doing things that were very unnerving. I didn't know if the electrical was safe. Ultimately, that was fixed, but I had asked them to fix it before I moved in, was not done. So I had to be very proactive to get it done, and then also had to take off time from work. Ended up being a day and a half because it was during the winter weather when they were having trouble getting electrician. And so electrical was the first thing I checked off my list. Then we went to plumbing. I went for a month and a half without hot water in the shower. That was ultimately fixed as well, but could have potentially been managed prior to my moving in. And the third was the air quality, which I noticed right when I moved in, I was having health issues immediately. And I thought it was related to the air quality. And this is an older house, like most of them in Buffalo are. Ultimately, independently, I went and checked the filter in the furnace, and it was totally black. I don't know when it had last been changed. But then I independently found a company that cleans vents and that could advise me about air quality. They came and checked. Ultimately, the landlords agreed to the cleaning, and that did solve the problem for me for the time being, but they expected me to pay half of it. So within a few months of moving in, I was paying $300 just to have clean air to breathe. And that's something that would also have been, if these proactive inspections had been in place, I could have been spared a lot of stress. I mean, these things, cost me health concerns, major health concerns. And I have a list because I want to keep myself to 3 minutes. I'm not going to go any longer. That was the first 4 months. I had many problems after that. But the cost to me were, number one, significant health concerns, stress, time off from work. I had to take quite a bit of time off from work and money. Sometimes I had to pay, for example, for the vent, or in another case, a plumbing problem that was not my concern, but I needed in that case, the shower to be fixed. So, again, with this amendment, I would have been protected from these kind of things as a renter. And as others have noted, this was in an owner occupied unit and a double in Buffalo. And so having the owner live in the same building does not protect someone and provide a safe space. I will mention one other thing, because the topic of lead has been so powerfully spoken about today, that this apartment also next door has a home with very badly peeling lead paint. It's been tested and now will be remediated. But I've lived in the apartment that I'm describing to you for 2 years with that right next door. Since houses in Buffalo are only a few feet away, I was also affected by that, and my pets as well. So I just encourage you to support enact the proactive inspections for people like myself who've been renters. And as Sarah had mentioned earlier, moving doesn't solve the problem. Often doesn't solve the problem even for the tenant, because we go to another place in Buffalo that may have similar problems. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, and for sharing your personal story with this. Next, we're going to move to Council President Pridgen.
I'll be very, very brief, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. I want to make sure Pastor Pointer talked about there's a place where people can apply for grants and loans. And I just hope before we get off that he can let the public know where that is, number one. And then finally, the council has been, and the administration and the county, we've been talking about this for years, of ways to deal with this. So I'm very pleased. I think that most of the people here we're singing to the choir, but making sure that the public does understand our position. So I want to be very clear for the record that, there are some landlords out there that are not for this legislation, and they do play games with people's lives. Many of them right now do not live in this city, and they don't give a daggone. I have one next door to me on Northampton who lives in New York City. His house is peeling. He's been in court over and over. So one of the things I think is so important to this legislation, which I fully expect to pass, at least almost unanimously, probably, if not unanimously, is that the courts have to be on board, because we can pass the legislation and you all are being very kind and very nice and very professional. I don't plan on being that in this next word. They're slumlords, and they're slumlords who are killing a lot of children, period. I'll say that, because children, regardless of whether black, white, I don't care, they're children, and they're killing children. But there is a high number of children of color who are really dealing in neighborhoods where these slumlords get to come in, go out, come to court, go get a lawyer, pay money for a lawyer, but not pay money to come and do their housing. We must have housing court on board. We already have our city on board, as you heard from our city representative, from Anna and others people are trying to cooperate. People are trying to work together, but we got to make sure that the court also enforces, because we've got a lot of landlords out there. Now they're saying because of COVID, well, we're not enforcing. No, not the city. I want to be clear. The city is out there. I just saw a city inspector out on his job doing what he needed to do. But if we put the legislation, and then these people, these slumlords, these sometime murderers of dreams and murderers of life and murderers of hope, if they get to slide, then it'll all be in vain. So I encourage us to include the courts in this conversation. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I went longer than I promised.
Thank you. Councilmember Bowman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to thank everyone on this call for the great detail and well-rounded discussion. And that is why I would like to be added as a sponsor as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we go to Councilmember Nowakowski, we just wanted to share that information from Reverend Pointer. The information from Reverend Pointer, he shared the website. Actually, it just went down on my screen. So if you can unmute yourself and share it, because it popped up and then it just disappeared.
It's easy. It's getaheadoflead.com. And you'll find a plethora of resources, especially for landlords, but also for others.
Thank you very much. So it's getaheadoflead.com.
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much. Councilmember Nowakowski with some closing comments. And before you do, I again just want to thank everyone for their very thoughtful comments and all the hard work that people put into this over the past several months, years. Legislation like this doesn't just pop up overnight. It takes a lot of hard work from different people, organizations, people from the community, attorneys, all coming together and trying to put what is in the best interest of the area. So thank you again. And Councilmember Nowakowski.
Yes, I just want to conclude these remarks. This was a wonderful hearing, and I would like to congratulate everyone on this call, because it really comes from just private citizens to people on the Lead Safety Task Force, to Lou Petrucci in the Department of Inspections, which has been wonderful, the Law Department of Anna Falikoff, the Mayor of Buffalo. Everyone has, Kara, from the Lead Task, the task force is able to jump on and get ahead of this problem. And I would like to thank everyone, and I would like to move this forward, please.
Good night.
Majority Leader Rivera.
Thank you very much. We mentioned a lot of people, but I want to give a special thank for Eric Mickles from my office, who worked and has been in my office only a few months, and he's worked day and night on this legislation together with Anna Falikoff. So I want to thank you all, including Councilmember Mitch Nowakowski. 3 pillars of this this policy or this ordinance is education, testing, and enforcement. And the standards are very basic. It's health and safety of our kids. We will be inspecting these properties and these homes, and we will be saving many lives. And now we join other cities that are doing the same thing. And I hope that other cities look to us as a model as they look at the legislation that we put together. But a special thanks to Eric Mickles. Thank you so much, Eric.
Thank you, Councilor.
Motion is to approve.
Motion is to approve, seconded by Councilmember Bowman, and I know we still procedurally, we have to approve several different items through this. So Bethany, if you want to bring us through those, and then we can close out this item. Thank you. So I think this was, we were just, technically, we were discussing item 4, right? Okay. So we will, right now, we're going to approve all the items that were, or send a motion to approve all of the items that were associated with this. So if we want to, if we have to go through those items.
Those items, Mr. Chair, begin at number 10,
Do that.
20-1429.
Item number 10.
I'm sorry, it's actually item number 9, starts at number 9 with 242.
Thank you.
Starting-
Correct.
Item number 9, ordinance amendment, chapter 242, housing standards.
Motion to approve. Motion to approve items 9, 10, and 11.
Councilmember, the chair is muted.
Motion to approve items 9 through 13, seconded by Councilmember Wyatt.
I'm not on your committee, though.
Seconded by Councilmember
I'll second.
Noakowski.
Are there any other items that we need to revisit? None?
This Majority Leader, Council President wanted to revisit 20, 28, and 35 from the table.
Just want to send them without rec to the full committee.
That's item, motion to revisit item 20, 28, and which was the other one?
35.
Item 35, there's a motion to send the first, there's a motion to send those without recommendation. Is that the motion?
Yes, that's the full motion, not to repeat.
Seconded by Councilmember Noakowski.
No further items to discuss. Motion to adjourn.
Seconded by Councilmember Scanlon.